I think there's about an hour and a half's worth here altogether, and I'd like to go for maybe a half hour to 45 minutes, and then we'll stop and see if there are any questions, and thereafter take a short break and then dive back in and go for the rest of it. So if you've got any questions, kind of hold them for then, and we'll break in the middle for a pit stop and a little question period there then. So next slide, please.
I guess we can.
Why is this going just one?
Well, I guess that's the way the presentation was set up, where I can bring up the whole slide.
Yes, do that.
Okay. Is that it? Oh,
Yeah, two more lines.
okay.
All right. Uh, some of this initial stuff are just some pretty obvious things. As we mentioned before, we're going to put all of these slides on the website, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. But what you need, the minimum crew on a race committee boat, are 3 people, a timer, and sounder or somebody that does the horns, and a signaler that does the flags, and the guy in charge who should be siding the line. And either he can do the horns. There's a horn switch right on the mast where the PRO siding the line would stand, and there's another horn button on the console of the boat that the timer could do. If you had a 4th person on the committee boat, what they should be doing is doing recording what the PRO tells them to, which is primarily watching for people that are getting close to the line or maybe over the line early. We're going to talk more about that later. At the finish, these 3 people, again, the principal race officer or PRO would be siding the line and calling the boats finished and tooting the horn for the first finisher in each fleet. Then the other 2 people would be a recorder and then a backup recorder, or you might say helper recorder. If the recorder says I missed something, the backup person would assist to look up and see what the sail number was, or keep another list of recording themselves. On the Markset boat, 2 people, one to drive, one to actually put the marks in the water. Next slide. This is just a list of all the equipment that would be on the committee boat.
Oops.
Whoops. Okay. The flags are all in a big pigeonhole thing at the harbor. The should install those before leaving the harbor. On the back of the committee boat, there are 6 flag halyards. So facing aft from to right, you put the division flag first, and then the P flag on the next one. If you are a pessimist, you might want to put an I flag in there, or just leave the rest of them empty except for the AP flag, the postponed flag on the far left. Then there are 2 halyards on the mast of the committee boat, which you would install your blue and orange flags, which again we'll talk more about. We'll talk more about all of these flags. Then we also have 2 recall flags, which are mounted in pigeonholes on the bow of the boat, and there are some long pieces of conduit to put those flags on. Also, you don't want any other flags except the official ones. Then we also have course plaques, which are in the cabinet, depending on what the sailing instructions define, all of our races on Sunday are windward leeward courses. So the only plaque you need to post is a weather heading plaque, which goes on the side of the committee boat, and you list that to the nearest plus or minus 5 degrees. So that would show things like if you want to put 90 degrees, it's 09. 180 degrees would be 18, 220, 22, etc. And that should indicate what the weather heading for the first mark would be. And then you should also check and make sure you have other equipment. There's a yellow bag in the harbor master's office that has some VHF radios in it besides the radio on the boat, and a hand bearing compass, and there should be a backup horn in the cabinet on the committee boat. So you want to make sure all this equipment is on board before you leave. And the score sheets, you have score sheets, clipboards, pencils in the drawer. Make sure you've got all of this stuff available before you head out. Next slide. The Markset boats, you should have a spare radio. One of the most frustrating things is if the PRO is trying to call a Markset boat and they got their radio off or it's not working. So it's best to have 2 radios. Also your marks and anchors, and there are counterweights that go on the marks so the marks stand up straight. Also you need a hand bearing compass and a wind indicator, or wind wand as we call it. And each whaler has a bag in the race, hanging in the race committee shed, which has a dry erase plaque, black marker, and some code flags in. We'll talk more about what those code flags are that you need. Is S for shorten course, an N for abandon, an H flag, which means get back to the harbor, and a C flag for change course, which we very seldom use on Sunday races. Next slide. One of the signals that you may make at the dock is this is the postpone flag, which is the International Code Answering Pennant, or AP. And if there's not enough wind to start racing, or there's a delay for some reason, you would put up AP with 2 horns at the dock. And if we're not going to have any more racing for the day, we can't go out for some reason, usually no wind, you put up the AP with a code flag A under it with 2 horns. That means no racing. The other flag that you may use at the dock is we use an orange flag to indicate that the race committee is departing for the course, which is put up 30 minutes before the beginning of the start sequence, and lowered just before the start sequence starts. So when you get out on the course, if there's a orange flag flying, that means there's more than 10 minutes to go before the start of the race. And when that comes down, that means there's 11 minutes before the start. Next slide. Next slide. All right, the countdown before leaving the harbor. Actually, you want to start watching the weather trends and check the sailing instructions. I do it for several days before the race day to see what the weather trend looks like and see how it varies as this race day gets closer. You want to load your equipment up between 1 and 2 hours before. And there are instructions on the inside of the race committee shed door. Check on those. Make sure your team is together about an hour before it's time to leave. and make sure who's going to do what jobs, and that you've got all the equipment lined up and ready to go. Then also send out the Markset boat to start reading the wind about a little under an hour before the race, say 50 to 45 minutes. And then at 30 minutes, decide whether the weather is suitable, put up your orange flag, blow a horn, and head out for the course. Next slide. Uh, the weather indicators that we usually look at that are a good idea to think about is, do the current conditions match the forecast? If they do, the wind will probably last. At Carlisle during the summer, there's a sort of a definite wind pattern. In the morning, you'll get an east to southeast wind. And regardless of what the forecast is for the day on lighter wind days, then late morning it gets lighter, and then it'll fill in mid to late afternoon. The east southeast is caused in the mornings by the heat island off the town of Carlisle. And as the weather gets warmer during the day, the breeze will fill in the direction that the forecast says, hopefully. If the conditions match the forecast when you leave, you're probably going to be okay. Otherwise, the breeze may swing toward the south and maybe a little bit to the southwest as the day goes along. And the best wind is usually between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. The other thing you want to do is to check on a cell phone or someplace that has a radar to make sure you don't have any storm cells within 2 hours of the lake, which would be coming from the west or southwest about halfway between St. Louis and the lake. That gives you say from O'Fallon east, probably not enough time to go out and have a race. But just want to watch to make sure there are no storms in there. Check your radar on your cell phone from time to time. Next slide. The weather websites that I like there's one called AirNet, and the KMOV or Channel 4 has a pretty good radar that you can check. And then Weather Underground has a pretty good forecast that's based right at a weather station in Carlisle. Then the other things you have to consider for marginal conditions, any wind over 15 miles an hour, you don't want to take people out unless you've got 2 whalers available. Generally, if it's that windy, there will be enough people that don't want to sail that you can probably find enough people to man a second whaler fairly easily. Conditions when it's not conducive to race, if the air or water temperature is pretty cold, less than 50 degrees, you don't want to go out if the winds is over 15. And if there are sustained wind or gusts actually over 20 and gusts over 25, I would say that's not conducive for club racing. And again, if there are storm cells that seem to be coming toward the lake and they're within 2 hours of the lake, you don't want to go out for those conditions. Next slide. Go ahead, another one. Okay, you want to talk a little bit, or we're going to talk in some depth about setting the courses on the lake. This is a map of the whole Carlisle Lake, just to give you a feel for what it looks like. And starting at the bottom with the dam, or CSA marked is where it is. And then going up that shore along the CSA to Allen Branch, that area is, and then across to the Coles Creek area, that area down to the dam is usually the sailing area that we sail in. And if you look directly across the lake where it says South Shore State Park, there's a boat ramp over there, which we can see from the harbor. And there's also that little restaurant with the blue roof called the Fish House. So that is the area where we normally sail. You'll notice that the lake has a little bit of bend in it. The long axis of the lake on up to the north end is about 30 degrees by 210, one direction, and the 180 beyond it. Down at our end of the lake, it bends around, and the axis of the lake down at our end is about 50 degrees, 50 by 230. So the wind, you'll notice some days when the wind is really blowing straight down the lake, as you get out fairly far into the lake, all of a sudden the wind and everything picks up. There's almost a line on the lake where the wind and the waves pick up. And that's caused by this difference in angle. Wind to 30 degrees blowing down the lake, you'll get out about a third of the way across, third of the half the way across, and bang, all of a sudden the waves get bigger and the wind gets stronger. And that dog leg in the lake is the reason for doing that. Also, to set marks, you want to avoid high banks. And the highest bank along the lake in our area is along the CSA shoreline, from our pavilion all way on up the line to the Allen Branch Point. So you want to stay, we're going to talk more about where to stay off of with marks, but that is a high bank. And then also the down on the dam, right down there on the east side of the dam, there's a fairly high hill which affects the wind. And so you don't want to put marks down near the dam and or over by that high hill. Also, considering shifts, wind bends more perpendicular to the shore as you get near the shore. So if you set marks near the shore, and which is not a good idea, and the starting line is out in the middle of the lake, your mark set boat might be reading a substantially different wind direction, like 20, 25 degrees different than what you're seeing on the committee boat out in the middle. And the reason for that is the weather mark that he wants to put down is getting close enough to shore that it's getting a substantially different wind direction. Not good. We'll talk about more about that also in a couple of slides. Next slide. I just stuck this one in. This map is available. Any of you that have ever sailed pursuit races have seen this before. There are some landmarks around the lake with compass headings on, and this map is available a number of places if you need to know the compass headings to various landmarks. And just quickly, the landmarks around, starting at the lower left corner, there's a radio tower up next to the dam over on the west shore, which is that first one. The next compass is centered on the observation building. The third one up on the west shore is at Allen Branch Point. Then going across the lake, there's one on the Coles Creek ramp. And then coming down the lake, there's one that's called Land Point. If you look over there, there's an area in South Shore Park where the grass is cut near the edge of the lake, and there's a picnic pavilion out there, which is another good landmark to take headings off of. And then the South Shore ramp, which is the ramp that you can see directly across from CSA. So these maps are available. There's some on the committee boat. If you need to have landmarks and headings to various landmarks, this map is available. Next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about places to put courses. Again, the Allen Branch Point is shown on there, and I've got a red line from Allen Branch Point all the way down to where the spillway at the dam is. And the reason for that is you don't want to put any marks to the west of that near the shore, because that you're getting too close to that high shore area. If you look at that area, if you can spot the CSA Harbor, is that little area right down at the end of the gray part. The gray part there is Hazlitt State Park. And you know, you follow that Hazlitt Road down to the end, and that's CSA. And then as you go up that shore, there's a little sort of, it's not quite semicircular, but it's sort of a concave cutout in the shore, which you can, it's pretty obvious from out in the lake. And we're going to talk about referencing to that. And then as you go down toward the dam, right around the corner is the Peppenhurst Branch, which is that water area that runs up, way up and around behind the park. And then Allen Branch is the other big inlet up north there. So if you want to set courses for a lot of these wind directions, you would want to set up your starting area, and what I've shown is that green box. And how to get into that area, if you look, you go out a certain distance from the harbor to an imaginary line. You can sort of guess at a line by looking left and right from Allen Branch Point to the spillway, and see how far off the shore you are, and then go another time about that distance. And that area is probably the best area, which is right out from that little concave part of the shoreline. That's the best area for setting up start and finish lines for all of those wind directions, which I've listed under the area called green box. Now, if the wind is out of the southwest or out of the direct northeast, you want to go further out, over halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way across the lake to that area of the blue box, and set up your course there. Then if the wind is from northwest 290 to 330, that's the hardest place to set up a course, because you tend to want to get your weather marks up over on the high shore, unless you really go down the lake down to where this yellow box is, which is down almost halfway between the CSA and the dam in that area, which means that you're for a northwest to almost northwest wind, your weather mark would be right back toward Peppenhurst Branch, which is a low shore area, and it keeps the marks off of the weather marks off of that high shore area along the Hazlitt Park shore there. So that one of the mistakes that a lot of race committees make is in that northwest to north wind direction, is you don't take the course far enough down into that southeast corner, so that shoves the weather marks up too close to the high bank there. Anyway, you study that, and those areas are probably, if you put the starting line for the various wind directions in those areas, you'll have enough room to set a course without getting too close to a shore. Next slide. The next thing is, how long should the course be? We want to target races for about 40 to 50 minutes. And just some rules about estimating times of races. Most boats sail a beat or a run in about the same length of time. Now, then the reason for that is the boats are sailing faster on a close reach or a beat than they are running dead downwind. But keep in mind that on a beat you have to tax, so you're sailing a further distance. So if you take the time for most boats to sail from the starting line to the weather mark, or running straight downwind, that is, these are the boats that run straight downwind. Now the cats and the e-scows don't follow that rule, but the majority of boats do. The say Scots and Lightnings will sail a run in about the same length of time that they sail a beat. So if you look at the number of times we go up and down the course, which we're going to talk about in the next couple slides, you can keep a running estimate of how long the race is going to take, which is kind of important so you don't get surprised and all of a sudden the race is running much too long. Next slide. Okay, the morning race, if we look over to the right there, you can see I've got a little start finish line marked, so you set that up. And then you've got two distances, a D1 and a D2. The D1 is the distance to the short course weather mark, the orange mark. And then the D2 is the additional distance up to the long weather mark, the yellow one. And then another time of D1 down to the leeward mark for everybody. And based on the differences for the wind strength, for a light wind of 3 to 6 miles an hour, the D1 distance should be about a quarter mile. And the D2 distance would be from there up to the long weather mark, about another 1/10 and a half. And then the leeward mark would be set downwind of the start finish line, again, a quarter of a mile. Then for a wind strength of 6 to 8, those D1 and D2 grow to 3/10 and 2/10. 8 to 12, little under half a mile, and the D2 3/10. And then over 12 miles an hour, D1 6/10 and D2 5/10, which means the entire beat for, say, an 8 to 12 for the short course boats is like 9/10 of a mile. And for the long course boats, it would be 3/10 further. Now we can start talking about the way we set the morning race is twice around. So the short course boats would go start up to SW, down to L, back to SW, down to L, and then back to start finish, which means they're going to sail the D1 8 times. So, and if we want 40 minutes, divided by 8 is 5 minutes. So those boats should be sail from the starting line up to the short weather mark in about 5, 6, 7 minutes. If it takes them, say, 10 minutes to get to the short weather mark the first time, and then another 10 minutes to get back down to you at the finish line, at the start finish line coming downwind. That means that that race is going to be about 80 minutes long instead of 40 minutes, which means you're going to have to shorten it. Now, how many chances do you have? We'll talk more about shortening later, but you can signal the shorten down at the leeward mark, the yellow mark, which means then instead of going twice around, instead of D1, down twice D1, up twice D1, down twice and back, they would go up D1, down to the L, and then back up the D1 distance to the finish. In other words, actually go once around the loop. So that's probably the simplest way to shorten if the race is running too long, is to signal it down at the yellow mark at the bottom. Or if it's really, really a drifter and it takes them much longer, you could actually shorten at the first weather mark and they would just go up there and back downwind to finish. But that would really be slow. I don't know if that would, you can think about that, whether that's a fair race or not. But you have your choices to shorten the course. You can shorten the first time around at the bottom, the downwind mark, or you could let them go back to the second weather mark and shorten so that they would finish coming downwind to the finish line, which would get rid of that last time down to the yellow mark and then back up. So you've got actually 3 options for shortening the course: at the first leeward mark, at the second windward mark, or the first windward mark. But like I say, that wouldn't be much of a race. I don't know if that'd be worth keeping that race. You might just want to cancel it off altogether. That'd be up to the Sunday Race Committee to decide that. Next slide. Whoop, missed one. Okay, the afternoon course, the start finish line is now down below the course. So the distance from your yellow mark to the short windward mark would be twice of D1. And then would be the D2 would be the distance up to the second yellow mark, the yellow windward mark for the long course. So the same distances for the wind speeds would follow, so you can use that as a guide for setting up in the for the short or for the afternoon race. Now, depending on the wind speed, if it's a nice, well-behaved day and the winds are about the same, the thing to do is just leave the marks out when you go in for lunch. And when you come out in the afternoon, just move your start finish line down below the yellow mark and set up there. And then, if anything, all you have to do is maybe tweak the marks a little bit and you've got your course set up. Of course, if the wind is changing substantially, you have to just take everything out of the water and start over. But why not be an optimist, leave them in and see what happens. And then if it does change, you can pull them out and start over in the afternoon. Next slide. Another one. Okay, this one we're not going to talk too much about. This is just some tricks for figuring wind or course headings. Most of our stuff are all windward, leeward courses. So all you have to do is figure 180 difference in or a back bearing from a heading. And the simplest way to do that, I've listed at the bottom there, is you can count up or count back to hundreds and then go back to tens. So if you've got a 240 course, the back bearing, I go down 200s, 140, 40, and then add 210s back, 50, 60. So the back bearing of 240 is 60. So you can do all of that mental mathematics and get these various headings very easily, which is the way I do it, just by adding and subtracting hundreds and tens. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. Okay. For setting marks, the anchoring for most wind direction, wind speeds, one of our milk jugs on the bottom is enough. If it's blowing 15 or more, you might want to put 2 jugs on. And then the trick there is to put the 2 jugs about 5 feet apart. So if the wind starts lifting the first one, the second one will stay on the bottom. We've tried that and it works pretty well. Also, you want to use counterweights on the turning marks so they stand up instead of laying over on their side. You really need about 10 pounds of counterweight. If you look in the building, there are some plastic covered sash weights, which are about the right amount. There are some disc weights, but some of those are much lighter. And you need about a lot, some of them you need 2 of them on there. So it says on there how much they weigh, so 10 pounds. Then you don't want to put out a lot of line scope on the marks because you don't want the boats to catch the anchor line going around the mark. And so the trick is to throw the anchor in and then sharten up on the line and then tie it off on the mark and throw the mark in once you've got the anchor line sharpened up. Also, to get your distances correct, hopefully you've got somebody in your fleet that can supply a GPS. Those things are pretty common now, and a lot of watches have GPS. So it sure is helpful if your mark setter has got GPS available. If worst comes to worst, you can use that map with those bearings and reference points and work off of that, but it's a lot more difficult. Next slide. Okay, the order of setting marks. First thing to do is to set up a starting line. If you've got 2 mark set boats between the race committee boat and the second whaler, or I say W2, which stands for whaler 2. Decide on your weather heading, and the course length you want, send whaler 1 up to the vicinity of the sharp weather mark and have him wait there and watch the wind. Then about 1 minute before the sequence is to start, decide on that and set the weather mark, and then have that whaler proceed up the extra D2 distance to where the long weather mark will be set, and drop that one in, and then hang out up there on the weather end until we're sure everything is happening and the starts are starting to go off. There's no reason to set the leeward mark yet. Stay up in the vicinity of the weather marks until the PRO is happy with them and the starting sequence is well underway, or actually until the starts are actually starting to go, and try to start on time if at all possible. Then after the starts begin, then the W1 can go down to beyond below the starting line and set up the leeward mark. The second whaler then is staying at the leeward end of the starting line to help watch the starting line and to make adjustments if necessary, if the wind shifts. So if you have two whalers, that's what to do with them. Next slide. If you had just one whaler, you can set up your starting line with the race committee and the whaler to start with. Again, the sequence, the process is like before. Send the whaler up to the chart weather mark and hold and watch the wind until you're getting close to the sequence start. And then within a minute or two of the sequence start, put that chart weather mark in the water, and then head on up to where the long weather mark would be. And the race committee boat can adjust the starting line as required by letting out and pulling in anchor line. Now the anchor line on the committee boat, there should be two lengths of line, and there's about 100 feet of line, which is a woven nylon, and then there's another line which is about half that length, which should be tied in with it, which is a braided line. So if you initially anchor the committee boat with the majority of that first length of line in the water, set up your line on that square, then you've got quite a bit of anchor line that you can pull up or let more out to adjust the starting line if you need to keep it square. But again, try to get the start sequence on time. And unless you have a really drastic wind heading change, you should be able to do that. Then after the start sequence or the starts are going, then the whaler can go down and set the leeward mark after the starts are started. Then once all the starts are gone, then that whaler can come back, pick up that starting mark and shorten it up for a finish line. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Next slide. All right, these are just some comments on the rules. The leeward mark is not need to be set until it's needed, and a mark is needed before boats begin the leg that mark ends, which means the leeward mark again doesn't have to be in place until boats are about to begin rounding the weather mark. The weather mark should be in before the preparatory signal, which is 4 minutes before the start. Now, if the chart mark is in, even though some of the first division boats go to the long one, they can use the chart mark to know what the proper direction is, so that's good enough. All right, and we already said the bottom mark, the downwind mark, can be set after the starts begin and shorten up for a finish line after all the starts are away. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, these are just pretty obvious. You don't want the starting line too short. You don't want it too long. It's sort of a Goldilocks thing. And what's too short and too long and not square, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. Okay, this is a picture of a starting line with 8 boats, and this starting line is less than the total length of all the boats. That's too short. Our biggest fleet probably is Flying Scots, and there can be 8 to 10 of those. So if you had 10 Flying Scots, they're a little bit under 20 feet long. So that means for a starting line, you need 10 times 20 feet, or about 200 feet. That's 2/3 of a football field. So you can keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, that's more like it. That's about the right length of the line for those 8 boats. The squares on that picture are a boat length, and uh, those are the starting line is a bunch of hypotenuses of 45-degree right triangles, which if you're going to be setting courses, you ought to know is about 1.5 times the length of the legs of that triangle. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 1.5. So you got 8 times 1.5 of the total boat lengths. So it could have been a little shorter than that, but not more than one boat length times the number of boats is the proper length for a starting line. Next slide. Okay, we just said that you don't want a starboard favored line, which means that the because of the wind direction, the committee boat end is further upwind than the other end of the line. So you want to adjust the mark to make sure that it's at right angles to the wind. If the wind is swinging back and forth, you want the line at right angles to the right part of the swing range. And if the swing range is greater than 10 degrees, you want to adjust the line like it for that reason to the right end of the swing range. Generally, it won't be that much. Next slide. Okay, very quickly, we're going to talk the starting system a little bit and then take a quick break. This is anybody that races, I think, knows that 1 minute before the sequence, the orange flag comes down. The first flag, the warning signal, is the division flag, goes up at 5 minutes with 1 horn. The preparatory signal, the P flag, joins it at 4 minutes with the sound. At 1 minute, the P flag comes down with a sound. Then at the start, the division flag comes down with a sound. Now our flag, the halyard that has the division flag on it, cleverly has 2 clips.
You accidentally, wait a minute. Ted, you muted yourself.
All right. All right, let me just say this slide over again. The orange flag down, 1 minute before sequence, 5 minutes, the division flag up, 4 minutes, preparatory flag up. Now, once that division flag is up, the bottom end of it that's down in the boat now has got 2 other clips on it. So you can take the next division flag and put it on there and be ready. So then at 1 minute, the preparatory flag comes down with a horn. Then at start, the division flag comes down with a horn. And lo and behold, the next division has gone up. So you're ready to rolling into the sequence for the second division right away. And then that first division flag is down right next to your feet. So you can take that off and put the next division flag on. And we just keep rolling through that sequence until all the divisions have started. Next slide. Okay, the postponement flag comes into play here a little bit, and we're going to talk about when during that sequence maybe we should postpone. Next slide. This is the okay. Okay, if the race committee determines during the starting sequence has make a timing or a flag error, and you can't really sneak an error through with the timing or flag, because keep in mind you've got maybe 30, 40 boats out there with stopwatches on, so there's no way you're going to sneak a timing error by them. And the flags are the official signals. So if a flag isn't made properly at the right time, that's a serious error, and you probably should postpone and start over. Or also, if there's not enough wind to run a race, you postpone. Or if the wind has a drastic shift so that the course isn't any good anymore, that's usually more than 15 degrees or so, you have to start over, reset the course anyway, so that should be a postpone. Or if one of the starting line marks becomes adrift, then you have to postpone. Next slide. When not to postpone, the starting sequence, the sound signals, if they don't happen, the flag signals are official. So if a sound signal doesn't happen with the flag, that's not a fatal mistake, so you can keep going. Or if the sound is a little bit late and the flag got up on time or down on time, again, that's not a fatal error. If some of the competitors aren't out at the starting area, but they could have been, you don't wait for latecomers. You start on time. Next slide. Okay, those are just some things to do. There's not really much to say about that. Go on to the next one. Okay, during the starting sequence, there's a few things to emphasize here. The timer really, excuse me, runs the show during the starting sequence. And the PRO should not be doing the timing and trying to watch the line both. You can't do both. So the timer should be running the operation during the starting sequences, calling the times, warning the signaler to put the flags up and down on time, and counting down to the various signals, the flag signals and the start. The PRO should be watching the starting line and the behavior of the fleet and deciding if the start is proper. The signaler is working the flags. If you have an additional person, a fourth person on the boat, that person should be taking notes for the PRO. If you've got certain boats that look pushy and are pushing the line, notice what their sail numbers are and give them to that additional person to write down, so that if they're over the line, you've got that sail number right away at hand to hail to be from as being over early. And then also the PRO should signal recalls if required. So again, I must emphasize the PRO should not be doing the timing. If that one person is doing both jobs, that is a good way to have problems. Next slide. Okay, you want to minimize conversation during the start sequence. If you've got a talkative whaler up at the weather mark, please tell them that unless some drastic wind shift occurs, you don't want to hear from them during the starting sequences. And then again, the timer does the countdown, calls the flag signals. The PRO can look around and monitor the wind, watch the weather, watch the fleet. But then you have to be glued to the starting line for that last minute before the start to make sure everybody's in the proper place. If they are not, you're the one that calls a recall if necessary, and also be prepared to postpone if something really goes haywire. Next slide.
Oops.
Okay, this is just a countdown for what goes on again during the starting sequence. We've, I think, said all this before. So at 4 minutes, that P flag goes up. We usually don't use an I flag on the Sunday races, so we won't spend the time talking about that now. There's some slides about that, which we're going to skip over tonight. If you want to learn about that, you can read about it later on. Next slide. Okay. That 1 minute is where the line sighter really has to start getting observant and watch the boats and see who's close. If somebody's over the line and coming back down, make sure you have that sail number so that if they don't get back in time, you know who it is. And next slide. Okay, at the starting signal, you have to decide immediately if there are boats over, and if so, signal an individual recall. It's not a good idea to hail all clear, because if the boats can hear some hail but can't hear exactly what it is, they might think it's a sail number being hailed, so it could be misunderstood. So if everything is fine, you don't need to say anything. Also, you need to watch the fleet to see what they're telling you about the starting line. If there are a lot of boats wanting to start on the port tack down at the far end, that means your line's not so hot. But by then it's too late to change it. Next slide. All right, we're going to skip that. You can think about those for yourself later on. Next slide. Okay, starting penalties. We're going to take about 2 minutes there, and then we'll take a break and answer some questions. Or if you want to get up and walk around a bit, you can do that. We'll break for 5-10 minutes. We're not going to talk about the I flag. Go on, next slide. Next slide. Another one. Another one. Recalls.
Oops.
Okay, the individual recall is something that you may use on Sunday. That is the one thing that has a required sound signal. If a boat, and now the new rules say if part of the hull of the boat, the crew doesn't matter anymore, or sails don't matter. If part of the hull of the boat is on the course side of the line at the starting signal, that means the boat is considered OCS and has to return to the proper side of the line and restart. And the signal for that is the individual recall. The line sighter has to decide immediately if there's going to be an individual recall, declare it, make one sound signal, and put the flag that looks like that, which you've got on one of those pieces of metal conduit, and stick it in one of the poles up at the front of the boat right away. then that signal is kept up until all the boats return, or if they don't return, for 4 minutes, and then it comes down, and there is no sound signal when that signal comes down. What you will have is usually maybe just 1 or 2 boats, and you try to hail them, hail numbers, and as soon as they get back to the proper or the restart side of the starting line, that signal comes down. Next slide. Okay, this is if you have an individual looking at the line 5 seconds before the start, you've got 2 boats that may be over early. Obviously, the green guy may get back. Gray obviously is not going to get back. The brown one is probably going to go around the end, so he's not a problem. Next slide. Yep. Oh, at the starting signal, look what happened. All of a sudden, the blue boat and the red boat kind of got nosed over also. Green did get back, and gray didn't get back. So now you've got an individual recall. You've got 3 of them to call. Next slide. Okay, we do it radio or PA, and we do specify that we will hail if possible. The hail is a courtesy. If you don't get it hailed or they don't hear it, that's too bad. They're still considered OCS. So you may, if you, the whaler, if you've got one at the port end of the line, they can help you if necessary or if possible. Next slide. Okay, we already said all of that stuff. Okay, a general recall, we very seldom do that on Sunday. It would have to be a real mess, a whole bunch of boats over, and that you can't catch them all. Our Sunday starts usually aren't that big. So let's go next slide. And next slide. And skip that one. Okay, we're going to take a break now. If people have any questions, you can put your hand up, and then we're going to, let's say it's 8 minutes after, we'll go until quarter after to answer questions, or if somebody wants to go and refresh their beer or something, it's 8 after, we'll go till quarter after. Shirley, any questions up around?
I don't, okay. It looks like Rick wants to ask a question. He's got a hand up.
Okay.
Can you unmute yourself, Rick?
Unmute. Ted, you hear me?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions, actually. Are you allowed to, let's just say the first signal goes off. In that 5-minute sequence, are you allowed to change the pin? Can you do that if all of a sudden it's skewed or you learn that? Can you change the pin?
You can adjust the starting line up to 4 minutes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Once the preparatory signal goes, if you have to adjust the starting line, you need to postpone.
Okay. So you do have 1 minute.
1 minute there, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, you can run forward and pull up some anchor line or throw some more out
Okay.
in that 1 minute. But after the P flag is up, the preparatory flag is up. No, if the line gets too bad, you have to postpone.
Okay, copy. Next question. If you have one boat OCS, they come back around and their signal that they're clear is you drop the flag.
Yes.
What if there are 2 boats or more? Do you have to hail them? Because sometimes they're just sitting there waiting like this. They're wondering, am I clear? So what's the rule there?
You don't have to. It's polite to hail them. You
Okay.
keep the flag up until the last boat gets to the proper side of the line, or
Okay.
for 4 minutes, whichever comes last.
Okay. That's good.
But yeah, you don't have to according to the rules, but our standard practice is we 4004 clear when they're
Yeah.
back to the restart side of the line.
Gotcha.
Hail a sail number, yes.
Okay. And the other question I have is, as we get into, when we do spring and fall, when the weather gets a little dicey, is there a minimum of how many participants to start a race that the race committee, is it in our guidelines, or is it?
It's
how is
in
that
our
decided?
guidelines. If there are less than 6 boats,
6 boats.
the committee does not have to start a race. If
Okay.
they want to, they may. If there are a few boats, you don't have to.
Okay, good. And then the final question I have is, how on earth do we decide which whaler to take out?
It's whichever one you love the most.
Okay.
There's really I have my druthers.
Okay.
I like the one we call Whaler 4.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
But that's just my preference. Depending on who's going to operate it, they can pick whichever one they want.
Okay.
Mhm.
The newest whaler is a little bit smaller than the others, and I personally don't care for it. It has some quirks,
Okay.
but some people like it. So whichever, whatever.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Jeff, I was out a couple of years ago in the Whaler, and we had steady winds of 30 with gusts to 35, and 40 was predicted that day. At what point should the whalers come in if the wind's starting to get really strong?
As soon as we bring we send the fleet in, then the whalers should come in also. We usually, what we do is if the wind or the weather becomes unraceable and we signal the fleet to get back into the harbor, generally the whalers shepherd the fleet back in, but then come in right away. There's no reason to go back and get the marks and stuff. It's safety first. The whalers should come in along with the racing fleet, and we'll go out and get the marks after the weather clears up.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, what's the best way to estimate the distances for the putting the marks in and all that? Quarter mile. I can't tell how far that is. So what's
Well, hopefully you can come up with somebody in your fleet with a GPS to do that.
okay? So you're using GPS to
GPS is the best way to do it.
okay.
Those things are pretty common these days. In fact, the club owns one, and I think it's in the yellow bag. I don't know how many instructions there are with it. If you're going to have the race duty the next weekend, you might want to start thinking about getting a GPS lined up a week ahead, or if it's the club one, figure out who's going to be using it and try to learn how to use it a week ahead. Linda, you got a question?
There's a question in your chat box.
Oh,
I can't see it.
Let's see. It says, is there a reason we run different courses in the morning and afternoon? You may have mentioned it earlier, but I just joined. It was from Mike.
Yeah, the reason we have different courses in the morning and afternoon is some people like downwind finishes and some people like upwind finishes. So we try to give each group at least half of what they want.
well, it's also easier to do the back-to-back in the afternoon with the
That's true, but with a back-to-back, that means everybody in the afternoon, we have 2 races back-to-back. That's a very good point. The boats end up right in the area where they're going to start again, which is why we do the downwind finish in the afternoon and the upwind finish in the morning.
Yeah, thanks. That makes sense.
Any other questions? Okay, well, it's quarter after, so let's plow ahead. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay, now that we've got all of those starts done, the race committee doesn't get to sit down in the corner and have a beer and wait for somebody to finish. What do you do during the race? The thing is to observe the course, keep taking wind readings. Your whalers should be stationed at one mark or the other. And again, the people on the committee boat should be estimating the time of the race. Usually the Flying Scots or the Lightnings are the best indicators. The Lightnings, if they sail a long course, which they usually do. So you want to watch that. Again, we said for that first chart weather mark, if it takes them more than about the Scots more than about 8 minutes at most to sail that first half weather leg, you're probably going to have to shorten the course, which means in the morning race you want to get a boat down to the leeward mark and signal there. Or if it's an afternoon race, you want to get up to the weather mark and signal there. And so then the race would be once around, once up and once back. So you have to watch those times, because if it takes, well, I'm sorry, back up. In the afternoon, that chart weather leg is 2 times D1. So instead of 5 to 8 minutes, that means you got 10 to 16 minutes. And if they can't get up there, if the Scots can't get to that weather mark in 10 to 16 minutes in the afternoon, that means you're going to finish it to 1 lap, which means they're going to have 1 beat and 1 run. So, which is another good reason in the afternoon you keep that whaler up at the weather end, because that's where they're going to be finished signaling a shorten in the afternoon. Where they're probably going to be signaling a shorten in the morning race is down at the bottom at the leeward mark. Next slide. Okay, where is the place if you're going to shorten at the leeward mark? Where is the best place to signal from? And it's actually somewhere between E and F, which is going to be the place for the committee boat to be setting to signal the shortened course. Okay, next slide. Okay, reasons for shortening course. We usually wouldn't be abandoning unless there's bad weather coming. Then we could abandon the race. But our biggest reason for shortening is that there's not enough wind to the boats to sail in the allotted time for the whole course. Or we might want to abandon if a mark is terribly out of position. And by rule, you can abandon for any reason that affects the safety or fairness of the competition. Or you can shorten to get in the last race. I don't know if that's a valid reason, but these are, according to the rules, these are reasons why you're allowed to shorten or abandon a race. Next slide. Okay, our procedure for shortening course is a little bit different. We signal at the rounding mark that starts the finish leg, which means that you would finish on the next leg of the course. And the boat signaling flies the S flag with 2 beeps, 2 horns, as the first boat approaches, and then keep that flag up. And as the various boats round, give 2 beeps intermittently as the boats round. And then if you're going to just shorten for certain divisions, you could fly just a division flag also, but that's really rather confusing. Usually, if we're going to shorten course, it's because the course is too long on Sundays, and we usually shorten for everybody. And the typical place where it gets shortened is in the morning race. It's either at the first leeward mark, which means they're going to sail windward and then leeward and then back up to finish. Or you could let them sail in the morning race windward, leeward, all the way up to windward, and then signal up there. And then they would shorten with a leeward finish on the second time down, instead of proceeding all the way back down to the leeward mark and then the back up to half a leg to finish. So you've got 2 choices to finish in a morning race. In an afternoon race, about the only place that you can signal a shorten is when they get up to the weather mark the first time, and they would go up there and then back down. So you want a 40-minute race. So that means that if they don't get up to that first weather beat within 15 minutes or so, it's probably time to shorten when they come back down. Or at least by, well, no, if they take 20 minutes to sail the first weather leg, that's 40 minutes. That means an 80-minute race in the afternoon. So that's much too long. So I'd say, yeah, if they're much more than 10 minutes on that first beat, then it's time to think about shortening. Next slide. Okay, abandonment is the checkerboard flag. And ideally, the only time we abandon is to send people in, and we really should put it over the H flag to signal get back in the harbor. But on usually our CSA thing, anytime you see an N flag on a boat, that means abandon and get back into the harbor. We'll tell you for otherwise. Generally the H flag, which is a half red and half white, if you see N and H flying, that's definitely get into the harbor as soon as you can. We generally don't abandon by classes, so it's going to be everybody. If we're going to abandon, it's everybody. Next flag, yeah. All right, finishing. The finish line should be less than half of the starting line, probably 1/3 the starting line. And that can be as soon as everybody has started. The thing to do is to do that and then put up your blue flag, your finish flag right away then, and you're ready to for it to happen. Next slide. Okay, we already said all of that. If you're going to have a back-to-back flag, a race in the afternoon, put up the orange flag. If the wind is dying or it's getting too late, we can't start a race after 3:30. So then you would not put up the orange flag, which means the third race wouldn't happen. But in the afternoon, if you're going to have another race, you should put up that orange flag, which signals that there will be another race. And then as boats finish, as a courtesy, we hail sail numbers. And then for recording, you should probably have 2 recorders, each doing their own recording to make sure you've got the things accurate. A tape recording also is desirable if the line sighter misses a sale number. What you can do is, if you've got 2 that are real close together and then another one, what I would do is call a number and then say break, which tells the recorder to skip a line and then get the next finished sale number, and then have the second recorder or somebody try to figure out who that missing sale number is and fill it in. So if you the recorder, if the line sighter wants the recorder to skip a line because they missed a number, just say break, and that tells the recorder to skip a line on the recording sheet, and then do the next 1 or 2, and then we're going to go back and catch up on what we missed. Next slide. Okay, we haven't done this before, but we may, I think, do it this year. We're going to have a what they call a finishing curfew, and that'll be a sailing instruction that say any boat that isn't finished, let's say just for argument, 20 minutes before the first boat in that fleet finishes, they would get scored automatically 1 point more than the last boat that finished, which means if one boat is way far behind, that we don't wake everybody sitting out there waiting for this other boat to finish before we move ahead. I think most of you have seen that occurred one time or another. I don't believe that's in the CSA sailing instructions previously, but we're going to do it this year. Next slide. Okay, the recorders, we need times for Division 1 and the first Flying Scot and all of the Division 3 boats, and then any protest hails or other events, just write them down. If Flying Scot 3112 protests Flying Scot 4001, after you put down in the recorder Flying Scot whatever I said, then just in the box behind it just say P4001, and you can list your protests, if any, just that easily. Recording the finishes in order. Don't try to put them by classes, just put them down in order as they finish. Also keep in mind now the definition of finish is like the definition of over early has changed. It's strictly the hull, not the sails or crew crossing the finish line. It's the hull crossing the finish line is the definition of finishing. So if somebody sticks their spinnaker way out, it's not when the spinnaker crosses the line, it's when the bow of the hull crosses the line. All right. And okay, we're going to say this again on the next slide, I believe. Oh, we're going to, okay, which boat is finished? Yellow has finished just then. Which boat is still racing? Actually, they're both still racing, even since yellow has finished. Next slide. Which boat has finished? Yellow has finished. Which boat is still racing? They're both still racing. Which boat has broken a rule? Blue has broken a rule. Blue has hit the finish mark. Next slide. Whoops. Nope, back up one. Yeah, okay, which boat has finished? Yellow has finished. Blue has not finished because they have a penalty pending. Which boat is still racing? Blue is still racing unless he doesn't clear his penalty. To clear his penalty would mean to go around and refinish. Yellow has finished and has cleared the finish line. So yellow is no longer racing and yellow has complied with the rules. The point here being yellow did not have to cross the line completely to finish and clear the finish line. You are racing until you have finished and cleared the finish line and finish marks. So by this point, yellow is no longer racing. Blue is still racing until it's obvious that he is not going to clear his penalty, that he's left the vicinity of the course. And then the committee could score blue as DNF. Next. Okay, what other scores can the race committee do is you can record protests, record a DNF if a boat doesn't finish, if they might radio you that they're not going to finish and going in, then write them down and score them DNF, or they may radio that they are retiring for some reason, and the score would then be RET, retired. And after all your results in, your two recorders should reconcile their records, make sure you've got everybody. If you're missing any boats, one or the other, that's a value for having it on a tape recorder or something. You can go back in order to check on that and then have your results ready to turn in. Next slide. Okay, what scores can the race committee score? If a boat was over early and did not return, you can score them OCS. If a boat did not finish, DNF. A boat informs the race committee that she is retiring, RET. And just this with the new rules, if you can see that a boat did not sail the entire course properly, you can score them NSC, not sailed course. That's in the new rules this time. Of course, if you're going to score any boat with one of these things, you're obligated to tell them you're doing so. The race committee may protest a boat, but you can't just score them DSQ. You have to inform them and then file a protest just like another competitor would. And again, the race committee, you must inform a boat if you're going to protest them as soon as possible after they finished. Next.
Oops.
Is that it?
I think that's it.
Okay. We've been an hour and a half, a little more. Any more questions? I'll stay here as long as somebody wants to have questions for about a half hour, whichever comes first.
Ted, I have a question.
Yeah.
How about a bowsprit? That's considered part of the hull, I would think.
Nope. It's a
It's
spar.
not.
It's a spar.
Really?
That came up among the judges, and they went to the equipment rules of sailing, and which is an obscure document of the international or world sailing. And the equipment rules of sailing define the hull as the molded part of the hull and the deck. And if a boat has what they call hiking racks are part of the hull, which would be the park bench part of a Hobie 18.
Yeah.
But a bowsprit, whether fixed or retractable, is a spar, not part of the hull.
So that would be the same with a spinnaker pole.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions?
Ted, in the yellow boat you just showed us, they were crossing the line, but then turning back below the line, is that bad etiquette to sail back where other people might be trying to finish?
As long as you don't interfere with anybody, it's just fine. It's bad etiquette if you do that and interfere with somebody, because once you turn back below the line, you're no longer racing. And when you're no longer racing, you're obligated to keep clear of every boat that is racing.
Okay.
So yeah, if you can do it, I've done it a lot of times. If I'm very close to other boats, then that's the quickest way for me to get away from them and not interfere with them. If I'm blanketing boats behind me, and if I continue on past the finish line and would then be continue blanketing boats, I may duck down like that yellow boat did if I get away from them quicker that way. Or if there's no other boats around and it's quicker to get back to the harbor that way, I'll do that.
Mhm.
That's acceptable, but you do, once you're no longer racing, you're obligated to keep clear of all boats that are racing.
Thanks.
And if you do not, you can be disqualified.
Yes,
Somebody
you can.
absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Ted, the other thing that's a courtesy, and I don't know if you mentioned this, but if you do abandon a race, weather's coming, it's super windy, there are boats that are really far away that sometimes don't hear or see that abandonment. So we send whalers out to go
Yes.
inform those people.
Yes, when we get abandoned for weather, we'll have not only the N flag flying on the committee boat, but we will send a whaler with an N flag down to the furthest boats of the fleet. And then that whaler will typically shepherd the fleet back to the harbor.
Yeah.
So yeah, but in conditions like that, don't mess with marks and this and that. Shepherd the boats, get everybody back in the harbor. We'll worry about the marks once the weather passes.
Ted, I like the way you're talking about the whalers shepherding the boats. Another point of courtesy that usually I see most of the time, but not always this last year, was that the whalers are typically the last boats in the harbor, just making sure everybody gets in okay, even on a good day.
Yes.
That instead of, I've seen this last summer a couple times, people go rushing in and kind of get in the way of all the sailboats coming in. So just
if
etiquette.
if there's good breeze and everybody's on their way back, the whalers, whatever.
Yeah.
If
Right.
it's the wind dies,
Right.
we typically, the whalers would tow people in if they want.
And just
So
be
starting at
available.
the back of the fleet, ask people if they want to tow. Some people do, some people don't.
Mhm.
Right.
And then you can create a long daisy chain and hook them on. It's best not to go too fast, but to bring the boats in if it's the wind dies, especially in a morning race, get them in so that you can have lunch and prepare if the wind comes back to get back out in good time to do the afternoon races. As we said, a lot of times the worst wind of the day will be late morning. So there, typically we may lose the morning race, but then have breeze come up at 2, 3 in the afternoon and can get back out and do the afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
The other thing that John had mentioned is he was wondering if you could post these on the website somewhere, the slides.
Yes, we are going to post the slides
Good.
on the website. And I think Shirley is recording the whole thing. So we're going to.
That's even better.
So all of my ramblings will be posted as well.
Hey, Ted, can you spend a quick minute talking about whether the starting finish line is open or closed?
What that means is open and closed start finish line means you can only cross the line when you're starting or when you're finishing. We don't do that anymore because we don't really have that many boats that it's really a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So previously what that meant was on your first run, if you recross the starting line, that was a no-no. That's no longer the case. So the start finish line by slang is called open. Now, of course, if you're one of the first division boats and maybe one of the scows gets back down before the catamarans all start, it's just courtesy to avoid that starting line, or if you're going to recross it, don't cut off a boat that's starting, but do use a little common sense. But we don't have any requirement that you're not allowed to cross the start finish line except when you're starting or finishing.
Ted, if that were the case and a boat was crossing during a start, then normal racing rules would apply in
Yes.
terms of right of way.
Yes.
I think we had something like that occur during the whale. Was it last year or the year before?
Now, typically during the whale, I don't know if we did before, but typically during the whale, because there's so many boats and boats that we're not familiar with, during the whale, we typically do have a closed start finish line.
Mhm.
Because to be able to keep track of all of those boats and boats that we're not used to seeing, you know, and something crosses the finish line, how do I know that they're on a run and they're not finishing yet, or they are finishing? So typically in the whale of a sail, we would have a closed start finish line.
And
But
that is
on Sunday,
determined,
go
and
ahead.
that is determined by a blue flag flying.
Well, it would be determined by the sailing instructions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. And typically the trick to do there, as soon as all the starts are, well, the blue flag may not be flying. The sailing instruction would say, except when starting or finishing, a boat shall not cross the start finish line in either direction.
Mhm.
Or actually it should say after the starting signal, a boat shall not cross the start or finish line in either direction except when starting or finishing. In other words, we don't want people going through there and confusing the recorders.
Ted, you mentioned there'd be a new way as far as if a boat took too long after the first boat finished, scoring them. Would that preclude just giving people a finish in place, or how will that work? Because sometimes it's, you know, if the wind starts dying, you have the fleet really spread out.
Well, you can give them a finish in place, but what I suppose they say no. I want to complete the course.
Okay, then you just give them the.
So then you say, well, okay, you got to finish within 20 minutes of the last boat to finish. And that means you got 10 minutes. Can you sail all the way down to the leeward mark and then back to the finish line in 10 minutes? I doubt it. So, you know, so you're going to get finished. Boom, you're finished.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the last year's pursuit race addendum form, we had a section under the safety portion that said that if there isn't a case of either heavy air or really light air, there isn't a need for a CSA motorboat to be on the course. Are we going to keep that for this year?
We decided not to keep it last year. I don't think.
Well, it's in the addendum.
Well, okay, it didn't get changed last year. We decided last year people felt most comfortable if we had a boat out there patrolling all the time during a pursuit race. So during a pursuit race, yes, there will be a whaler out available.
And that should get changed on the addendum then.
Yes, I will bug your fleet mate Desano as well. And hopefully one of us will remember to do that.
Well, I'll remember, because that's an issue of trying to get, you know, after I looked at the number of races that the cats were signed up for last year, the cabin fleet had 5 pursuit races.
Yeah.
And this year, on that form that DeSano sent out, the cabins aren't slated to do any race committee.
We haven't decided that. That will get decided in the first part of March. We will have a fleet captains meeting and determine the details of the race program. I don't know if the cabin boats have opted out for running the pursuit races this year. I have not heard.
Well, and they volunteered last year. They weren't required. It was
I
a
know.
volunteer.
Well,
I just wanted to let Karen know that. It
But
was a
I know.
volunteer thing.
Are they going to volunteer this year? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
We will find that out. But
Yeah.
for the pursuit races, we even have to decide how many of them they're going to be. So at the fleet captains meeting, we will make all of those details and set up those things then. Also, by the fleet captains meeting, we will have a draft of this year's sailing instructions, which we will review at that time, and all the fleet captains will have a chance to put in their gripes if they have any, and we'll adjust accordingly. So actually, Jim and I, the race co-chairs, we take our marching orders from the committee of fleet captains, if you will.
Hey, Ted, this is Bill Clark. If a race committee sees a boat that commits a foul out on the race course, like hitting a mark and not doing their turns, is the race committee required to file a protest?
No,
Or they just look the other way?
it's up to you. Generally race committees, the philosophy, if it's a very flagrant foul, we may file a protest. Typically, unless it's something that's really flagrant, race committees are deaf, dumb, and blind.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and it's up to you to sort of deal with your own conscience, decide what you think is flagrant. Or maybe talk it over with the rest of the race committee. I saw thus and so, ask your PRO, so-and-so did thus and so. What do you think? What should we do?
Okay.
If what I would do, like personally, if I saw somebody bullying of a novice, I might file that protest. If it's somebody hit a mark and then looked around, did anybody see me do that and go on? I don't know, maybe, maybe not. Most other things, if it was against another boat and the other boat didn't gripe about it, well, who am I to complain? So it's sort of a follow your conscience thing. Any other questions?
Well,
Going
thanks,
once,
Ted,
twice.
for putting together this program for us. I think it's been valuable to hear all these things, and the recording and the slides will be available for others to use later, and we can get the copies of the slides out to anybody that wants them, or get them posted on our website.
Thank you, Ted.
There's those few slides about what do I do now. I may start a little thing in the marks, put, you know, I'm a race committee and such happened. What do I do now? Put those like a little rules quiz in the marks with the answer on the last page or something.
Mhm.
So those are kind of fun to think about. Like, especially like the one where a guy capsizes in the middle of the starting line with 4 minutes till it start. What do I do now?
And that's happened.
Oh, that's happened. I've had a boat in a national regatta, had a boat capsize, you know, in a finish line, which is shorter, a boat capsized right in the middle of the finish line with a whole bunch of boats coming for the finish. You know, what do I do now?
Our little kite surfer was notorious for capsizing in the middle of the start line on Division One, wasn't he?
Yes, and some of the times that what went through my head should have made me go to confession.
Yeah, ditto. Ditto. I'm like with the Ranger, and you're gonna capsize right in front of me. I can't
Well,
turn
you
that
would
thing
take
that
care of the
fast.
problem forever, real quick.
I tried to actually, but I mean I didn't kill him, thank God.
Any other questions, comments?
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for putting up with me for the better part of 2 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Ted.
Right, bye-bye. I'm bailing out.
Aye.